"Enjoy, rancher. She bites," the Apache trader warned, but the rancher didn't buy her to save himself. The vast stretches of land, the quiet mornings with the sun rising over the hills, and the endless skies above had shaped him into a man of patience and resilience. Every day was a routine of hard work, feeding the cattle, mending fences, and checking the water supply in the distant pastures. Life on the ranch was not easy, but James liked it that way. It was simple, honest work, and he had always believed in earning his life through effort and dedication. One morning, as he was riding along the western edge of his property, James noticed something unusual in the distance. The sun was still low, casting long shadows across the grasslands, and the air was crisp with the scent of wildflowers and fresh soil. Off in the distance, near a small stream that cut across the plains, a figure was leading a strange animal. As he drew closer, he could see that the figure was an Apache trader, someone who traveled from town to town, often trading goods, animals, and stories. The animal with the trader was unlike anything James had ever seen. It was large, with a thick coat of gray and black fur, and eyes that shone with an unusual intelligence. Its ears were sharp, its posture alert, and its every movement spoke of strength and freedom. James slowed his horse and studied the creature, feeling a mix of awe and caution. The Apache trader noticed James and smiled, revealing a row of perfect teeth under his weathered face. "You see her," he said, nodding toward the animal. "Enjoy, rancher. She bites." His voice carried a mixture of warning and amusement, as if he had told this to many before and knew how they would react. James dismounted slowly, keeping his eyes on the wolf dog. He could feel the tension in the air, the quiet challenge in the way the animal watched him, the unspoken test from the trader. Yet, he wasn't a man to turn away from a challenge. Something about the creature drew him in. Her eyes, so alert and alive, seemed almost to understand him, to measure his intentions. There was a fire in her that reminded him of the untamed lands around him, of the freedom he himself had always valued. The trader continued, "She's not for everyone. Many have tried and few have succeeded. She will test your patience. She will challenge you. But for the one who earns her respect, she will stand by you like no other." James felt a shiver of anticipation. He had dealt with many animals in his life, some loyal, some wild, but never one like this. He could see her muscles tense as she shifted her weight, her sharp teeth glinting slightly in the morning sun. Yet, despite the warning, James felt no fear. He knew that fear had no place in understanding such a creature. Respect, yes. Caution, yes. But fear would only create distance. He spoke slowly, carefully. "How much do you want for her?" The trader's smile widened, sensing the determination in James' voice. "She is not cheap. And she is not safe. But if you are ready, I can make a deal." James considered this. He was not buying her to impress anyone or to show off. He was not in need of protection for himself. His land was quiet, and he was capable of defending it. What drew him was something deeper. He sensed in her a spirit that mirrored his own. She was wild, independent, and intelligent, a creature of strength and instinct. If he could earn her trust, they could be partners, not just in survival but in life on the ranch. After a long pause, he nodded. "I'll take her." The trader's eyes twinkled. He handed James the rope that had kept the wolf dog at bay. The moment James touched it, the animal stiffened, ears pricking forward, eyes locking onto him. He knelt slowly, keeping his movements calm and measured. He spoke in a soft voice, words barely above a whisper, introducing himself not as a master but as a companion. To his surprise, the wolf dog did not lunge or bite. She watched him carefully, testing his patience, observing every subtle movement. James could feel the tension slowly ease, though he knew this was only the beginning. The real test would come later, once they were away from the trader and the familiar smells of the plains. He led her gently back toward the ranch, keeping a careful eye on her and making sure she remained calm. She moved with grace, her head held high, yet every now and then she would snap or growl, reminding him that her spirit was not to be tamed lightly. James felt a mixture of challenge and excitement. Here was a creature unlike any he had met, and he had accepted the challenge without hesitation. Along the way, James reflected on his life. He had faced droughts, storms, and the occasional threat from wild animals, but he had always done it alone. There had been times when he wished for companionship, not just from humans but from someone, or something, that understood the rhythm of the land, the dangers, and the quiet joys of ranch life. Perhaps, he thought, this wolf dog was that companion. The journey back to the ranch was quiet, the kind of silence that speaks volumes. James could feel her eyes on him, alert and calculating, and he responded with calm assurance. It was a silent conversation, one of trust being built with every careful step. He realized that this was not about dominance or control. It was about understanding, patience, and respect. By the time they reached the ranch, the morning had fully broken. Sunlight poured over the fields, glinting on the fences and warming the earth. James led her to a small paddock near the barn, giving her space to explore while keeping a safe distance. She sniffed the air, her body coiled with cautious energy, and then, as if testing the boundaries of her new world, she began to explore, circling the area with deliberate precision. James watched her closely, fascinated by every movement. Her instincts were sharp. She noticed everything: the sound of a distant bird, the shift of wind, the scent of the nearby cattle. He could see the intelligence behind her eyes, the kind of awareness that could not be taught. It was clear that she was not just an animal to be trained, but a partner to be understood. Neighbors passing by soon caught sight of the unusual addition to James' ranch. Some whispered, some shook their heads, warning him about the dangers of keeping such a wild creature. But James remained calm. He knew that respect and trust could not be rushed. He had faced the opinions of others before and would do so again. What mattered was the bond he was beginning to form, and he was willing to invest time, patience, and care to nurture it. That first day ended with James sitting on the porch of his small ranch house, watching the wolf dog as she rested under a tree, her body relaxed but her eyes still alert. He realized that the Apache trader had been right. She did bite, not just physically but with the sharpness of her spirit. But that was what made her remarkable. He had not bought her to save himself or to show power. He had bought her to meet a challenge, to connect with something wild and extraordinary, and perhaps to learn more about patience, trust, and respect than he ever had before. As the sun set, casting golden light across the plains, James felt a quiet anticipation for the days ahead. He knew the path would not be easy. There would be tests, challenges, and moments of doubt. But he also knew that the wolf dog had chosen him as much as he had chosen her. Together, they would face the trials of ranch life, and perhaps in the process, they would discover a bond deeper than either had imagined. That night, James went to bed with a sense of purpose and curiosity. The ranch was quiet, save for the occasional rustle of the wind and the distant call of an owl. Somewhere nearby, the wolf dog lay alert, listening, learning, and preparing for the journey ahead. James understood that this was the beginning of a story, one filled with adventure, challenge, and the lessons that come from trust and companionship. And he welcomed it with an open heart. Back at the ranch, the wolf dog's presence immediately began to change the rhythm of daily life. James had grown accustomed to quiet mornings and predictable routines, but now everything seemed charged with anticipation. The animal was not ordinary. Her movements were sharp, her eyes constantly alert, and her behavior unpredictable. Each day brought new surprises, sometimes exciting, sometimes frustrating, but always demanding James' full attention. At first, introducing her to the ranch proved more challenging than James had imagined. The cattle, accustomed to the calm rhythm of the ranch, reacted nervously to her presence. They stamped their hooves, lowed in alarm, and kept their distance. James tried to guide her gently, but the wolf dog had her own rules. She stalked the edges of the pasture, circling the herd, testing their reactions and asserting her presence. She would growl at the slightest movement, snap at shadows, and sometimes dash after a stray chicken or goat, not out of malice, but simply because her instincts demanded action. Neighbors began to take notice. Some were curious, coming closer to observe from a safe distance. Others whispered warnings. "That animal will cause trouble," they said. "You're risking your safety and the safety of your herd." James listened politely but knew they didn't understand the bond he was trying to build. He wasn't attempting to tame her in the usual way. He was learning to communicate with her, respecting her intelligence and instincts rather than trying to force obedience. He spent hours observing her, studying every movement, every twitch of her ears, every flick of her tail. Slowly he began to see patterns. She was not aggressive for the sake of aggression. She was cautious, calculating, and protective. She tested boundaries constantly, not to provoke, but to understand. James realized that patience would be the key. Rushing her or using fear would only create distance. Instead, he responded with calmness and consistency, showing her that he was steady, reliable, and trustworthy. It was during one particular morning that the wolf dog first showed a hint of respect for him. James had been repairing a fence when a sudden rustle in the tall grass caught his attention. He froze, unsure if it was a wild coyote or a stray animal from the neighboring ranch. The wolf dog, who had been lying nearby, immediately sprang to her feet. She moved with silent precision, her body low to the ground, eyes locked on the movement. In a matter of moments, she had circled the area, growling softly, and then returned to James, her gaze meeting his as if to say, "I have it under control." James felt a surge of admiration. Here was a creature that could have caused chaos, that could have defied him at every turn, but instead, she was showing him her loyalty, not blind obedience, but a choice. That moment was small, almost imperceptible, but it marked the beginning of a mutual understanding that would shape their days ahead. The wolf dog also challenged James in ways he hadn't anticipated. She refused to enter the barn or stay in a confined space for long periods. She would slip out of the paddock whenever the gate was left open, exploring the hills, the streams, and the quiet forests surrounding the ranch. Sometimes she disappeared for hours, and James would worry, only to find her returning with a calm dignity, as if testing his patience, reminding him that she was not to be treated like a common animal. Despite the challenges, James began to notice subtle signs of change. She would lie near the herd during storms, standing guard against the elements. She followed him on his rounds, observing silently, learning the routines of the ranch, and sometimes alerting him to dangers he might have missed. Once, during a particularly harsh morning, a stray coyote appeared near the edge of the property. The wolf dog noticed it long before James did. She moved between him and the predator, growling and baring her teeth, and the coyote retreated immediately. James realized then that she had begun to see the ranch as her territory and him as her companion. Life on the ranch grew busier as James adapted to the wolf dog's unpredictable energy. He would wake earlier, preparing for the possibility that she might cause trouble or get into danger. He learned to anticipate her moves, reading her body language with growing skill. Her instincts, sharp and precise, began to complement his own experience. Together they formed a rhythm. He learned from her, and she began to respond to him in ways that were subtle but meaningful. Evenings were the most peaceful. After a long day of work, James would sit on the porch, the wolf dog lying at his feet or nearby, eyes still alert but body relaxed. He would speak softly to her, sharing stories of the ranch, of his family, of the animals he had cared for over the years. She would listen quietly, sometimes raising her head as if to acknowledge him, her ears flicking at the sounds of the evening wind. Those moments, though quiet, deepened their bond. They were not master and animal. They were companions, navigating the challenges of the plains together. However, the wolf dog's wild nature could never be fully tamed, and James respected that. He understood that her spirit was not meant to be controlled. She was independent, strong, and intelligent, and these qualities required patience and understanding. He began to adjust his own expectations, learning to celebrate small victories, moments when she allowed him close, moments when she responded to his voice, moments when she protected the herd without being prompted. The more James observed her, the more he appreciated her intelligence. She was quick to notice anything unusual, whether it was a change in weather, a distant animal approaching, or a subtle sound in the night. She was not just a pet. She was a guardian, a student of the land, and a partner in ways James had never imagined. Each day brought new lessons in patience, communication, and trust, and he found himself growing in ways he hadn't anticipated. Neighbors who had once doubted his decision began to see a change as well. Some came by to watch her in action, witnessing her protectiveness and keen awareness. Whispers of admiration replaced the earlier warnings. James, however, paid little attention to their opinions. What mattered was the growing connection between him and the wolf dog, the silent understanding that had formed through careful observation, patience, and mutual respect. Yet, challenges continued. She could not be left alone for long periods without testing boundaries. She sometimes disappeared into the hills, returning with a proud look in her eyes, reminding James that she was a creature of freedom and instinct. Every encounter tested his patience, yet every success, no matter how small, strengthened their partnership. He realized that life with her would always be an adventure, filled with unpredictability, learning, and moments of profound connection. By the end of the second month, James noticed something remarkable. The wolf dog had begun to integrate herself into the ranch routines. She accompanied him on his rounds, alerted him to anything unusual, and even started forming a cautious rapport with the herd. The wild, untamed energy that had once dominated her behavior now coexisted with a growing sense of loyalty and companionship. James could feel the beginnings of a trust that would sustain them through challenges yet to come. One quiet evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills and painted the sky in shades of gold and pink, James watched her resting near the barn. Her breathing was steady, her eyes half closed, yet they still held the spark of alertness that had first drawn him to her. He felt a deep sense of satisfaction, knowing that the bond they were forming was not built on fear, command, or control, but on patience, understanding, and respect. The wolf dog had proven that she was more than just a wild creature. She was intelligent, loyal, and capable of forming meaningful connections. And James knew that the challenges of ranch life, the threats of predators, and the demands of the land would be easier to face with such a companion by his side. He had not bought her to dominate her. He had bought her to learn, to adapt, and to discover the power of trust and partnership. As night settled over the plains, James reflected on how far they had come. The wolf dog had tested him, challenged him, and at times frustrated him, but she had also taught him patience, observation, and the value of respect. Their partnership was growing stronger with every passing day, and he felt a quiet confidence that they were ready for whatever the future might bring. And so, life on the ranch continued, now filled with the presence of the wolf dog, wild, alert, and fiercely intelligent. James understood that this was only the beginning. Challenges lay ahead, but so did adventure, companionship, and the unique bond that had begun to form between a man and a creature unlike any he had ever known. Together, they would face the plains, the storms, and the unexpected trials of ranch life, learning from one another, growing together, and proving that trust and respect could bridge even the widest gap between man and beast. Life on the ranch had settled into a rhythm, but James soon realized that calm days were rare on the plains. The wolf dog had grown more confident, and her presence was beginning to shape the dynamics of the ranch in ways James had not anticipated. While she had shown loyalty and intelligence, her wild instincts were still strong, and managing her required constant attention. She was no ordinary companion. Her energy demanded respect, and her unpredictability was a constant challenge. One morning, as James was checking the farthest pasture, he noticed signs of trouble. Several of the cattle were missing, and the tracks in the dirt suggested they had wandered toward the hills. Panic threatened to rise, but he quickly calmed himself. The wolf dog, who had been lying nearby, perked up immediately. She sniffed the air, her ears twitching, and began pacing with controlled intensity. It was as if she knew something was wrong even before he did. James followed her lead, moving quickly toward the hills. The wolf dog was faster than him, navigating the terrain with ease. Her eyes scanned the surroundings constantly, ears picking up every faint sound. James realized that while he had purchased her for companionship and challenge, she was also becoming an essential partner in the safety of his herd. Her instincts were sharper than his, her awareness more acute, and he began to see her as a guide as much as a companion. When they reached the herd, James found that a young calf had strayed close to a cliff's edge. The wolf dog positioned herself between the calf and the dangerous drop, growling softly at the frightened animal to guide it back toward safety. James was amazed at her precision and calm authority. Where he would have panicked or struggled to manage the situation, she moved with purpose and confidence. In that moment, he realized that earning her trust had not just been about companionship, it had been about partnership. As the weeks passed, challenges continued to grow. The plains were harsh and predators were never far away. Coyotes, wolves, and sometimes even stray bears tested the safety of the herd. The wolf dog reacted immediately, positioning herself strategically, barking, and occasionally chasing off intruders. James observed her tactics, learning from her, adjusting his own behavior. He noticed patterns in how she protected the herd, how she circled them at night, how she observed the landscape for subtle signs of danger, and how she anticipated threats before they even became visible. Her intelligence amazed him. Unlike ordinary animals, she seemed to analyze situations, making decisions based on instinct and observation rather than simple training. Sometimes she would refuse to follow him when he called, instead moving to where she sensed danger or an unusual disturbance. James understood that this was not disobedience, it was awareness, and she was protecting the ranch in her own way. He began to trust her judgment, often following her lead in situations where he might previously have acted on impulse. However, her fierce nature also tested James' patience. One afternoon, she chased a stray horse that had wandered onto the property, barking and snapping at the heels of the frightened animal. James ran after her, shouting and trying to intervene, but she would not back down. The chase ended only when the horse returned to its own pasture, exhausted and unharmed, and the wolf dog finally turned to James with a look that seemed to challenge him. It was a reminder that while she could be a protector, she was also wild, independent, and unafraid to assert herself. Neighbors began to take more notice of the unusual dynamic on James' ranch. Some came closer, curious to witness the wolf dog in action. They saw her defend the herd, guide lost cattle back to safety, and respond to James' commands with intelligence and precision. Whispers of admiration replaced earlier warnings. Yet, despite this recognition, James remained focused on the bond he was building. He knew that external approval mattered little. What mattered was the trust and understanding between him and the wolf dog. One evening, a sudden storm rolled in. The sky darkened quickly, and heavy rain began to fall, soaking the pastures and creating small floods along the stream. Lightning flashed across the horizon, and thunder rumbled through the hills. The cattle became restless, and the wolf dog sprang into action. She barked sharply, guiding the herd toward higher ground and positioning herself between the animals and the rising water. James ran alongside her, marveling at her courage and decisiveness. In that moment, he realized that he had not just bought a wolf dog, he had gained a true guardian, someone, or something, that could act decisively in life-and-death situations. Despite her loyalty, the wolf dog also demanded constant attention to maintain her trust. James learned that every interaction mattered, the way he approached her, the tone of his voice, the consistency of his actions. A moment of impatience or frustration could set back weeks of progress. He became more mindful, more deliberate in his words and actions, understanding that trust, once earned, could also be fragile. The wolf dog's presence also challenged James to grow in patience, observation, and understanding. He learned to anticipate her reactions, to respect her instincts, and to appreciate the unique intelligence she brought to the ranch. Their bond deepened not through dominance or control, but through careful observation, mutual respect, and the shared goal of protecting and sustaining life on the plains. As the seasons changed, new challenges emerged. Harsh winds swept across the plains, scorching summers tested the water supply, and winter nights brought freezing temperatures that threatened both livestock and humans alike. Through every trial, the wolf dog proved her worth. She would lie close to the young calves during storms, alerting James to any unusual activity. She would navigate snow-covered paths with ease, ensuring that the herd remained safe. Each day brought new lessons, and James realized that their partnership was evolving into something far greater than he had imagined. Yet, life was not without danger. One night, as James was returning from a distant pasture, he spotted unusual tracks near the barn. Wolves had been scouting the area, and he could see the tension in the wolf dog's posture immediately. Her body stiffened, ears forward, eyes sharp. James knew that a confrontation was possible. He quietly moved closer, letting her take the lead. As predicted, a small pack appeared, attempting to test the boundaries of the ranch. The wolf dog positioned herself strategically, growling, snapping, and driving the intruders back without allowing any harm to come to the herd. James felt a surge of respect and gratitude. In moments like these, he understood that he had chosen wisely, and that their bond was now a matter of survival, not just companionship. The wolf dog's behavior continued to astonish James. She seemed to anticipate problems before they arose, navigating the complexities of ranch life with intelligence and instinct. He began to rely on her judgment, trusting her decisions in ways he would never have imagined when he first purchased her. Their partnership was no longer about taming or control. It was about mutual respect, collaboration, and understanding. By the end of the third month, James could see the remarkable transformation in both himself and the wolf dog. She had become more than a wild creature. She was a companion, a guardian, and a teacher. Through her, James had learned patience, observation, and the importance of respecting instincts and intelligence, whether human or animal. He realized that he had not purchased her to make his life easier. He had purchased her to grow, to learn, and to discover a depth of connection that few humans ever experience with animals. Evenings brought moments of quiet reflection. James would sit on the porch, watching the wolf dog patrol the ranch, her body relaxed but alert. He thought about the journey so far, the challenges, the small victories, and the growing bond that had taken shape. It was clear that their story was far from over. Greater challenges lay ahead, and he knew that life on the plains would test them in ways neither had yet imagined. And yet, in the quiet of the evening, with the wind rustling through the grass and the wolf dog lying nearby, James felt a sense of peace. He had found a companion unlike any other, a creature of intelligence, loyalty, and spirit. She had challenged him, taught him, and shown him that trust was built not through fear, but through respect, patience, and understanding. Together, they were learning to navigate the unpredictable, harsh, and beautiful life of the ranch, ready for whatever trials awaited them next. The plains had always been unpredictable, but James had learned to trust his instincts, and the instincts of the wolf dog he now relied on so heavily. One late summer night, the quiet of the ranch was broken by an unusual sound. Low, guttural howls carried by the wind from the far edge of the property. James stirred awake immediately, heart pounding, and peered out of his window. In the pale light of the moon, shadows moved near the distant tree line, and he realized that a pack of coyotes was approaching. They were searching for food, and the herd was vulnerable. The wolf dog, who had been sleeping near the barn, rose instantly. Her body tensed, ears erect and eyes glowing with alertness. She sniffed the air, her growl low and steady, warning both James and the approaching intruders of her presence. James felt a mixture of awe and anxiety. He knew that this night could turn dangerous, not just for the livestock but for both him and the wolf dog. He quickly dressed, grabbed a lantern, and headed outside. The wolf dog was already moving, positioning herself between the herd and the shadows beyond the trees. As James approached, she did not retreat or falter. Instead, she turned her head briefly to acknowledge him, her gaze intense, almost as if to say, "I have this. Stay close." He felt a surge of trust. He knew that the bond they had developed over months of patience, training, and understanding had prepared them for this very moment. This was not a test of control, but a test of partnership. The coyotes crept closer, emboldened by the darkness. James counted at least 5, their eyes reflecting in the lantern light. The wolf dog stepped forward, her growl resonating through the night, a deep, warning sound that echoed across the plains. The coyotes hesitated, circling at a distance, clearly aware that this was not a prey to be underestimated. She moved with precision, positioning herself strategically to protect the weakest animals, the calves. James realized that her actions were instinctive yet calculated. She knew exactly how to handle the threat without endangering herself unnecessarily. James and the wolf dog worked together seamlessly. He shone the lantern toward the intruders, their silhouettes flickering in the light, while she advanced in short bursts, barking and growling to keep them at bay. The coyotes lunged occasionally, trying to test her resolve, but each time she responded immediately, driving them back with confidence. James could hardly believe the coordination between them. It was as if they had been moving together for years, reading each other's cues instinctively. Hours passed in tense silence punctuated by sudden bursts of movement. The wolf dog never wavered. Her fur was slick with dew, muscles coiled and ready, eyes locked on every motion of the approaching predators. James was exhausted from running and shouting, but he felt a deep respect and admiration for her bravery. She was fearless, but not reckless. Every step, every movement, every growl was precise and purposeful. At one point, a coyote broke through a weak point in the fence, rushing toward a young calf. The wolf dog reacted instantly, intercepting the predator before it could reach the herd. Her teeth flashed in the moonlight, a warning that forced the coyote to retreat. James acted quickly, helping to secure the fence while the wolf dog continued to patrol, ensuring that no further intrusions occurred. In that critical moment, he realized something profound. He had not purchased her to save himself. He had purchased her to protect the life he had built, the animals he cared for, and the legacy of his ranch. By the time the first light of dawn touched the horizon, the coyotes had retreated, driven away by the combined effort of James and the wolf dog. The herd was safe, and the ranch had survived the night unscathed. Exhausted but relieved, James approached the wolf dog, who had finally relaxed slightly, though her eyes remained alert, scanning the surroundings. He knelt and spoke softly, praising her courage, acknowledging her loyalty, and offering the quiet gratitude that words alone could not express. The events of that night marked a turning point. James realized that the bond between him and the wolf dog had deepened far beyond what he had imagined. She was no longer merely a companion or a protector. She was a trusted partner, a guardian whose instincts and intelligence were unmatched. In the silence after the danger had passed, James reflected on the journey that had brought them here. From the moment he first saw her with the Apache trader to the nights spent earning her trust, to the challenges of integrating her into the routines of the ranch. Every step had prepared them for this critical moment. The wolf dog, too, seemed to understand the significance of the night. She lay near the herd, her head raised slightly, ears twitching, watching over them with unwavering focus. She had faced danger and emerged victorious, yet she remained humble in her actions, never seeking praise or reward. James felt a deep respect for her independence and courage. He understood that their partnership was built not on dominance or control, but on trust, respect, and shared responsibility. In the days that followed, James noticed subtle changes in her behavior. She became more attuned to his movements, anticipating his commands without being told. She continued to patrol the ranch with diligence, but she also allowed moments of calm, resting near him while he worked, following him with a quiet loyalty that spoke volumes. Their routines had become seamless. The wolf dog had become an extension of the ranch itself, embodying its strength, resilience, and vigilance. Neighbors who had previously doubted James' judgment began to see the remarkable bond between him and the wolf dog. Stories spread of her bravery during the coyote attack, and many were astonished by the level of intelligence and loyalty she exhibited. Yet James paid little attention to the recognition. What mattered most was the silent understanding between him and the wolf dog, the knowledge that they could face challenges together, relying on each other's strengths and instincts. James also reflected on the lessons he had learned from her. She had taught him patience in ways he had never experienced, showing that trust could not be rushed or forced. She had shown him that loyalty was earned through consistent care, understanding, and respect, rather than dominance. And she had revealed the power of instincts, proving that intuition, when combined with experience, could save lives and protect what mattered most. Even as life returned to a semblance of normalcy on the ranch, James remained vigilant. The plains were unpredictable and dangers could arise at any moment. But he faced each day with renewed confidence, knowing that the wolf dog would be by his side, ready to act with courage and intelligence. Their bond had been tested in the crucible of real danger, and it had emerged stronger than ever. That critical night had also changed James' perspective on what it meant to protect and nurture life. He realized that protection was not merely about physical strength. It was about awareness, strategy, and trust. The wolf dog had demonstrated all of these qualities, and James had learned to value her instincts as much as his own judgment. Together, they had navigated a life-or-death situation, and the experience had forged a partnership that would endure any future challenge. As summer faded into autumn, the ranch carried on, but the memory of that night remained vivid. James often found himself reflecting on the wolf dog's bravery, her intelligence, and the remarkable connection they shared. He understood that their journey was far from over. More challenges, more dangers, and more opportunities for growth lay ahead. But he also knew that together, they could face anything the plains threw at them. In quiet moments, James would sit on the porch, watching the wolf dog patrol the perimeter of the ranch. Her movements were purposeful, her eyes sharp, and her presence a constant reminder of the bond they shared. He marveled at how far they had come, from a wild, untamed creature bought on a whim to a loyal, courageous partner who had proven her worth in the most critical circumstances. And in that realization, James felt a deep sense of gratitude, knowing that he had not only found a guardian for his ranch, but a companion who had taught him lessons about trust, respect, and courage that would stay with him for the rest of his life. The night of the coyote attack became a defining story of the ranch, passed down among neighbors and fellow ranchers. Yet for James, the true significance lay not in the tale itself, but in the bond forged through danger, trust, and mutual respect. The wolf dog had proven that her loyalty was not just a product of training, but a reflection of her character, her instincts, and the connection she had built with him. And James knew, without doubt, that he had not purchased her to save himself. He had purchased her to protect the life he had built, and in doing so, they had both grown stronger, braver, and wiser. The ranch had settled into a rhythm, but life was no longer the same. The wolf dog had become more than a presence on the land. She was now an essential part of its heartbeat. James walked through the pastures early one crisp autumn morning, the air filled with the scent of dry grass and the soft warmth of the rising sun. The herd moved calmly beside him, the wolf dog trotting just ahead, ears alert and eyes scanning for any sign of danger. The quiet harmony of the ranch reflected the deep trust and understanding that had grown between man and animal over the months. James often thought back to the day he first met her, when the Apache trader had warned, "Enjoy, rancher. She bites." He smiled quietly to himself, remembering how he had dismissed the warning, drawn instead by her spirit and intelligence. He realized now that the trader had spoken the truth. She did bite, not just physically, but with the force of her presence, her independence, and her will. And yet, she had also given something equally powerful in return: loyalty, courage, and an unspoken bond that had changed the ranch and his life forever. Neighbors still came by, some to admire the wolf dog, some to learn from James about how he had managed to form such a unique partnership. They watched as she patrolled the ranch, protective yet calm, a balance of wild instinct and cultivated trust. They asked James questions, but he often found it difficult to explain. The bond he shared with the wolf dog was built on respect, patience, and observation, elements that could not be taught, only experienced. He understood that outsiders might see her as dangerous or untamed, but he knew the truth. She was a guardian, a teacher, and a companion, all at once. James reflected on how much he had learned from her. She had shown him the importance of patience in all areas of life. There were moments when frustration could have led to anger, when a misstep in judgment might have cost him time, trust, or even safety. But the wolf dog had demanded calm, deliberate action. He had to observe, understand, and respond thoughtfully, rather than react impulsively. Over time, this lesson extended beyond the ranch. It influenced how he interacted with people, animals, and the world around him. The wolf dog's bravery remained remarkable. Even when storms raged across the plains, her vigilance never faltered. One afternoon, a sudden windstorm swept through the ranch, tearing at fences and scattering debris across the pastures. James was occupied with securing the livestock, but the wolf dog anticipated the threats before he could respond. She moved quickly from animal to animal, nudging those that had strayed, barking warnings when necessary, and standing guard near the most vulnerable. He watched her in awe, realizing again that she was not simply a companion, but a protector whose instincts were as sharp as any human strategy. As the seasons changed, James noticed that the bond they shared had deepened in unexpected ways. She began to understand his moods and intentions. Without a word, she would adjust her actions, following him when he needed company, giving him space when he needed solitude, or positioning herself where her presence could be most effective. Their lives had become intertwined, each influencing the other, each learning from the other. James often marveled at the subtle communication between them, an unspoken language built on trust, experience, and mutual respect. One morning, while checking the northern fence line, James found a young calf stuck in a ditch. Panic had already begun to set in, as the calf struggled against the water and mud. The wolf dog sprang into action, running ahead, guiding the calf to safer ground while keeping it calm with gentle nudges and protective positioning. James arrived just in time to lift the calf from the ditch fully, but he knew that without her intervention, the outcome could have been very different. He looked at her, gratitude filling his chest. She had saved the calf, not out of obligation, but out of understanding, instinct, and loyalty. The years that followed solidified their partnership. James noticed subtle shifts in how the wolf dog integrated into the community of the ranch. She allowed a few of the calmer animals to approach her, showing signs of trust and even playfulness. Visitors were cautious, but they could see the intelligence and discernment in her eyes. She had earned respect not through dominance, but through skill, reliability, and courage. People began to speak of her not as a wild animal, but as a legend of the plains, a creature whose loyalty was matched only by her remarkable spirit. For James, the greatest reward was not recognition from others, but the knowledge that he had formed a bond that few people ever experience. She had transformed his understanding of companionship, showing him that loyalty, courage, and respect could create a connection that transcended words. Through her, he had learned about trust, patience, and the strength that comes from partnership rather than control. Each day, as he worked alongside her, he felt a quiet sense of fulfillment, knowing that together they had navigated trials, danger, and unpredictability with resilience and wisdom. Even in quiet moments, the wolf dog remained alert, ever watchful. She would lie near the barn, ears twitching at distant sounds, ready to respond at a moment's notice. James often sat beside her, speaking softly, reflecting on the journey they had shared. From the day he first purchased her, through the months of challenge and training, to the night when they had defended the herd from coyotes, their story had been one of trust forged in action. It was a story of patience, understanding, and shared responsibility, a story that had left an indelible mark on both their lives. James often thought about the future of the ranch. He realized that the wolf dog was more than a guardian. She had become a teacher. She had shown him how to observe more carefully, act more deliberately, and respect instincts, both his own and those of others. Through her guidance, the ranch thrived. The animals were safer, the routines more efficient, and the land itself seemed to respond to the quiet strength that she brought into every corner. Neighbors would occasionally ask James what it had been like to live with such a remarkable animal. He would smile, sometimes struggling to find words that truly captured the experience. It was not just her intelligence, her bravery, or her loyalty. It was the way she had become a part of life itself, shaping his days, teaching him lessons, and inspiring a deeper understanding of the connection between humans and animals. He often said quietly to himself, "I did not buy her to save myself. I bought her to learn, to grow, and to protect what matters most." As the years passed, the wolf dog aged gracefully, her movements slower but her intelligence undiminished. She still patrolled the ranch, guided the herd, and watched over James with unwavering loyalty. He continued to work beside her, respecting her wisdom and learning from her experience. Their partnership had endured storms, threats, and the harsh realities of life on the plains. Together, they had faced danger, triumphed over challenges, and built a legacy of trust and respect that would last long beyond the lives of either of them. One evening, as the sun set in brilliant hues of gold and orange, James stood on the porch of the ranch house, looking out over the land. The wolf dog lay nearby, her eyes half closed but alert, ears occasionally flicking at the sounds of the evening wind. James felt a deep sense of contentment. The journey had been difficult at times, filled with tests of patience, courage, and understanding. Yet every moment had been worth it. He had not only found a guardian for his ranch, but a companion whose presence had enriched his life in ways he could never have imagined. The ranch continued to flourish, the herd safe and healthy, the fences secure, and the land productive. Stories of the wolf dog's bravery and intelligence spread among neighboring ranchers, but James cared little for the fame or attention. What mattered was the quiet, enduring connection between him and the wolf dog, a bond built on mutual respect, patience, and unwavering loyalty. As the night settled over the plains, James reflected on the journey they had shared. From the day he first met her with the Apache trader, to the months of challenges and training, to the critical nights when danger threatened the ranch, their story had been one of growth, courage, and trust. He knew that he had learned as much from her as she had from him, and that their partnership had transformed both their lives. In the end, James understood the true meaning of the trader's words. She bites. She had tested him, challenged him, and at times frustrated him, but she had also taught him lessons about loyalty, courage, and respect. And in return, he had offered her trust, patience, and understanding. Together, they had created a bond that was unbreakable, a story of companionship that would be remembered long after their time on the ranch. The wolf dog had become more than a guardian. She had become a legend in her own right. And James knew that he had been fortunate to experience the depth of connection, courage, and wisdom that she brought into his life. Their journey had proven that respect and trust, patience and understanding, could create something extraordinary, a partnership that thrived even in the harshest conditions, a bond that transcended fear, and a legacy that would live on in the memory of the plains and the animals. They had protected together,